Chapter 1 of The Device by Gord B. Arthur woke up like he always did, cramped and full-bladdered. At 65, he was resigned to it. The aches didn't ask permission anymore. They just arrived, settled in, and made themselves comfortable. His dog, Timber, always woke him at the same time every morning, in the same way, a single, deep bark. Not frantic, not impatient, just declarative. Time to get up and feed me. Time to get up and let me out. Time to get up and start the day. Always at the same time. 7 a.m. Every morning, no matter what. Rain, shine, hangover, heartbreak, it didn't matter. Timber was the metronome of Arthur's mornings. Arthur groaned and shifted, the bed springs protesting louder than he did. He knew the drill. If he didn't move soon, Timber would wait just long enough for him to drift back into sleep, then let out another bark, deeper, louder, and somehow more judgmental. It was their ritual, their contract. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, feet finding the cold floor like old friends. Timber's tail thumped once against the wall in approval. Arthur smiled despite himself. "It's your world, isn't it?" he muttered, rubbing his eyes. "I just live in it." He shuffled toward the kitchen, the smell of yesterday's coffee grounds still lingering in the air. Timber padded behind him, nails clicking softly on the hardwood. Arthur filled the bowl, opened the back door, and watched as Timber trotted out into the yard like a king inspecting his kingdom. It was a small price to pay for the unconditional love he got in return. That bark, annoying as it was, meant someone needed him. And in a world that had grown quieter with each passing year, that meant everything. Chapter 2. It had been 2 years since Mary passed. The house still held her, softly, like a scent that clings to old sweaters or the way sunlight used to fall just right on her favorite chair. The children had long since scattered to cities and suburbs, chasing careers and raising families of their own. Arthur didn't blame them. He'd taught them to go, to build, to be brave. But now, in the quiet of his small farmhouse in rural Alberta, he sometimes wished he'd taught them how to stay. The land had once stretched wide, 120 acres of wheat and barley, kissed by wind and watched over by Arthur's calloused hands. But after the accident, he sold it off piece by piece, until only the house, the barn, and 5 acres remained. Just enough to breathe, just enough to remember. He and Mary had carved out a decade of peace there. Retirement had suited them. Mornings with coffee and crossword puzzles, afternoons tending to the garden or fussing over timber, and evenings wrapped in the kind of silence that only comes from knowing someone so well you don't need words. Then came the cancer. Fast, ruthless, like a thief in the night. It took her piece by piece until all that was left was goodbye. Now it was just Arthur and Timber. Timber, with his solemn eyes and steady bark, had become the rhythm of Arthur's days. Loyal, demanding, and utterly unbothered by the weight of grief. He didn't ask questions. He didn't offer platitudes. He simply existed beside Arthur, a living reminder that love, however simple, still remained. But Arthur had a plan. Arthur always had a plan. He didn't take a dump without a plan. That was the joke Mary used to tell at dinner parties, her eyes twinkling as she teased him. And it was true. Arthur was a man of lists, of routines, of contingencies. He didn't trust the world to be kind, so he made sure he was ready when it wasn't. This new plan, though, it wasn't written down. It wasn't typed into his old desktop or scribbled on the back of a feed store receipt. It lived in his bones. It had started as a whisper, then grew louder with each passing day. Something had shifted in him. Not broken, not healed, just shifted. He didn't know if it was madness or clarity, but he knew this. The world had taken Mary, had taken the farm, had taken the noise and the laughter and the smell of fresh bread cooling on the windowsill. It had taken enough. Now, it was Arthur's turn to take something back. Chapter 3. After breakfast, the ritual began. Arthur fed Timber, walked him down the gravel path that once led to wheat fields, and spent 40 minutes playing fetch, which, in their version of the game, meant Arthur threw the ball and Timber watched him fetch it. Great exercise. For Arthur. The morning air was crisp, the kind that hinted at frost even in late September. Timber eventually settled into his usual post on the porch, front paws crossed like a sphinx, eyes half-lidded but alert. Arthur gave him a nod and turned toward the barn. The barn loomed like a cathedral of rust and memory, 12 meters by 12 meters, with a ceiling that soared nearly 7.3 meters high. It hadn't housed livestock in years. After selling the farm proper, Arthur and Mary had repurposed it, storage for her antiques, a workshop for his tinkering, and later, a sanctuary for grief. Now, it was something else entirely. Arthur stepped inside, flicking on the overhead sodium lights. They buzzed to life, casting a pale orange glow over the space. Dust motes danced in the beams like ghosts with nowhere else to be. Along the north wall stretched a workbench nearly 3.7 meters long, scarred, and stained from decades of use. Above it, kitchen-style cabinets lined the wall, filled with tools, precision screwdrivers, soldering irons, torque wrenches, and neatly labeled bins of fasteners. Below the bench, more drawers and compartments brimmed with parts. To the right, a cluster of industrial power tools stood like sentinels: drill presses, a metal lathe, a wood lathe, a MIG welder, and a belt sander that still smelled faintly of cedar. Arthur was fully equipped. This wasn't a hobbyist corner. It was a machine shop disguised as a barn. Up in the loft, which covered a quarter of the floor space, racks and shelves overflowed with electronic components: capacitors, resistors, circuit boards, coils, sensors, and spools of wire in every color. It was chaos, but it was his chaos. He knew where everything lived. And in the center of the barn, dominating the floor like a monolith, sat the device. It was a sphere, gleaming aluminum, seamless and smooth, nearly 3.7 meters in diameter. It rested on a tripod stand of thick steel supports, each bolted into the concrete floor. There were no lights, no seams, no markings. Just one feature broke the surface: a hatch, oval-shaped, about 1.2 meters tall, large enough for a man to climb through. Arthur approached it slowly, reverently. He ran his hand along the cool metal, then pressed a hidden latch. The hatch hissed open with pneumatic grace. Inside, the sphere was padded in thick vinyl, earth tones, muted and warm. It felt like stepping into a cocoon. At the center was a single seat, mounted like a fighter jet's cockpit chair, cushioned, harnessed, and built to cradle the body against forces unknown. To the left, a control board was mounted to the armrest, designed to swing out and lock into place in front of the occupant. Buttons, toggles, and a small screen blinked to life as Arthur climbed in. He sat there for a moment, surrounded by silence and circuitry. Outside, timber barked once, deep and deliberate. Arthur smiled. The world had taken much from him. But this was something he built. Something no one could take. Chapter 4. Arthur's plan was simple. At least, it looked simple on paper. The device would be activated, and he would go somewhere. Not metaphorically, not spiritually, physically, tangibly. He would leave this place behind, this quiet acreage of memory and routine, and embark on one final adventure. He had always loved adventures. As a young man, Arthur had joined the Navy, chasing the horizon across oceans that shimmered with promise. He'd seen ports that smelled of spice and diesel, danced with strangers under foreign stars, and once spent a night on a beach in Crete, watching satellites blink across the sky and wondering what it would take to reach them. Then he met Mary. She was the kind of woman who made you want to stay. So he did. He left the sea behind, bought the farm, raised the kids, and built a life that was rich in its own quiet way. But now, Mary was gone. The kids were scattered like dandelion seeds on the wind. And Arthur was alone. Except for Timber, of course. Faithful, unflinching Timber, who now lay curled on the porch, unaware that tomorrow might be different. That tomorrow, Arthur might not come back. The device stood in the barn like a secret waiting to be told. 3.7 meters of seamless aluminum, perched on its tripod like a relic from a future that hadn't happened yet. Arthur had dreamed of it for years, sketched it on napkins, simulated it on outdated software, whispered about it to Mary when she was still strong enough to tease him about his mad scientist phase. But it was no longer a dream. It was real. It hummed now, faintly, like it was breathing, like it was waiting. Arthur climbed inside that evening, just to feel it again. The vinyl padding cradled him like a womb. The control panel swung into place with a soft click. He ran his fingers over the switches, the buttons, the screen that now pulsed with a soft amber glow. He had tested everything. Twice. Then again. The calculations were sound. The energy source, well, That was the part no one would believe. But it worked. It had to work. Tomorrow, at 7 a.m., the same time Timber always barked, Arthur would activate the device. And if all went as planned, he wouldn't be here anymore. He would be there, wherever there was. He didn't know if it was another dimension, another planet, another version of this world where Mary still hummed in the kitchen and the wheat still swayed in the wind. He didn't know if it would be light or dark, warm or cold, silent or screaming. But he knew this. It would be different. And that was enough. Arthur sat in the cockpit a moment longer, listening to the barn creak around him. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the trees like they were whispering secrets. Timber barked once, deep, deliberate. Arthur smiled. Tomorrow. Chapter 5. 7 a.m. Timber barked, one deep, resonant note. The same as every morning. But this time, Arthur opened his eyes with a different kind of clarity. Today is the day, he thought. Not a maybe, not a someday. Today. He rose slowly, joints stiff but spirit sharp. Let Timber out. Prepared his food. Let him back in. They ate together in silence, the kind of silence that only years of companionship can make comfortable. Then, as always, they went outside for their ritual. 40 minutes of fetch. Arthur threw the ball. Timber watched. Arthur fetched it. Timber wagged his tail in approval. Arthur chuckled, breath fogging in the cool morning air. He might actually miss this. He would definitely miss Timber. When they were done, Timber returned to his usual post on the porch. But today, he didn't settle right away. He stared at Arthur, long, unblinking. There was something ancient in his gaze, something that reached beyond words. Of course he knew. Dogs always know. Arthur knelt beside him, wrapped his arms around Timber's thick neck, and held him close. No words, just warmth, just goodbye. Then he turned toward the barn. The device sat in the center like a sleeping giant, gleaming, seamless, waiting. Arthur didn't hesitate. He couldn't. Hesitation was the enemy of resolve. He climbed the steel steps, opened the hatch, and lowered himself into the padded cockpit. The vinyl seat embraced him like it had been molded to his shape. He strapped himself in, hands steady despite the storm inside him. The control console swung into place with a mechanical grace, locking in with a satisfying click. Arthur stared at it for a moment. This was it. Years of dreaming, building, calculating. All of it led to this moment. He pressed the power button. It lit up instantly. The hatch hissed shut behind him, sealing him in with a soft click. The air inside shifted, subtle, but noticeable. The device felt alive now, like it had exhaled and was waiting to inhale. Arthur entered the coordinates, the ones he'd calculated over months of sleepless nights and scribbled notes. He double-checked them, triple-checked. Then, with a breath held tight in his chest, he pressed the go button. And nothing. No rumble. No hum. No shift in gravity or flicker of light. Just silence. The same silence as before. The same barn. The same seat. The same man. Arthur stared at the console, blinking. He tapped the screen. Pressed the button again. Still nothing. His heart sank. Not in a dramatic plunge, but in a slow, aching descent. Like a balloon losing air. He had known it might not work. He had expected it might not work. But still, the disappointment was sharp. It cut deeper than he thought it would. He sat there for a long moment, hands resting on the console, eyes unfocused. Maybe he'd missed something. Maybe the calculations were off. Maybe the device was just a beautiful failure, a monument to grief and hope and stubbornness. He sighed, reached for the power switch, and shut it down. The lights dimmed. The hum faded. The silence returned. Arthur pressed the hatch release. Click. It began to open. Chapter 6. The hatch hissed open, and Arthur began to climb out, backward, awkwardly, knees stiff and shoulders tight from the cramped space. He grunted as he lowered himself onto solid ground, boots scraping against the metal lip of the device. It wasn't until he turned around that everything changed. The barn was gone. The house was gone. Timber was gone. Arthur froze, breath caught halfway between his lungs and the sky. He spun slowly, eyes wide, heart thudding like a drum in a canyon. There was no gravel path, no porch swing, no rusted pickup truck parked under the maple tree. In fact, there were no maples. The trees around him were tall, yes, but wrong. Their trunks twisted like braided rope, and their leaves, The leaves were unlike anything he'd ever seen. No two were the same shape, some jagged like lightning bolts, others smooth and spiraled like seashells. And the color, God, the color was impossible to name. A maroonish, reddish, greenish hue that shimmered when he moved, like oil on water. They pulsed faintly, as if breathing. Arthur took a step forward, then another. The air was thick, but not heavy. It smelled faintly of copper and something sweet, like overripe fruit. The sky above was a deep violet, streaked with ribbons of gold. No sun, no clouds, just light, everywhere and nowhere. Then, movement. To his right, something darted between the trees. Fast, too fast. Arthur turned, squinting. Was that a person? No, not quite. It had a humanoid shape, but the proportions were off. Arms too long, legs too short, head shaped like an egg tilted on its side. The skin shimmered like the leaves, and its movements were fluid, almost liquid. It paused, just for a moment, and looked directly at Arthur. Their eyes met. Arthur's breath caught. The creature's gaze was intense, curious, and, somehow, afraid. Then it turned and bolted, vanishing into the forest with a sound like rustling silk. Arthur stood there, stunned. Where was he? This wasn't Alberta. This wasn't Canada. This wasn't Earth. Not the Earth he knew. He turned back to the device. It sat there, gleaming and silent, exactly where it had landed, or arrived, or shifted. The coordinates had worked. The calculations were right. The dream wasn't madness. It had worked. Arthur felt a strange mix of triumph and terror rising in his chest. He had done it. He had actually done it. But now he was here. Wherever here was. Chapter 7. Arthur didn't know exactly where he was. Not in the way a man knows his postal code or the nearest Tim Hortons, but in a mathematical sense. Oh yes, he knew. He had spent over a year buried in chalk dust and coffee grounds, scribbling equations that danced between string theory, multiverse theory, and quantum mechanics, all stitched together into what he proudly called Arthur's unified theory of going somewhere else. He hadn't just built a machine. He'd attempted to create an Einstein-Rosen bridge, a wormhole, a shortcut through the folds of reality itself. The kind of thing that made physicists twitch and sci-fi writers weep with joy. And now, standing in a forest that looked like it had been painted by a colorblind surrealist, Arthur suspected he had actually done it. The device sat behind him, silent and gleaming, like a loyal steed waiting for its next command. First things first, Arthur reached inside and removed the control key. A small, flat piece of metal that looked suspiciously like a repurposed garage door opener. Without it, the device couldn't be activated. He wasn't about to let some long-limbed alien joyride his way back to Alberta. Inside the storage compartment, Arthur found the essentials: a compass, a pocket knife, a first aid kit, a flashlight, 6 one-liter bottles of fresh water, and several food bars that tasted like regret wrapped in cardboard. He took one of each, except the compass, which, upon inspection, spun like a drunken ballerina and pointed nowhere useful. Well, that's comforting, Arthur muttered, pocketing the knife and marking the nearest tree with a firm X. The bark split with a soft squelch, and a thick blue sap oozed out, smelling like burnt rubber and onions left in the sun. Arthur gagged, wiped his knife, and stepped back. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. No birds, no insects, no rustling leaves. Just the occasional shimmer of light filtering through the maroon red-green canopy, casting shadows that didn't quite match the shapes that made them. Arthur turned slowly, scanning for movement. No sign of the creature he'd seen earlier. The one with the egg-shaped head and limbs that looked like they'd been drawn by someone who'd never seen a human but was trying really hard. Still, he felt watched. Not in a threatening way. More like the forest itself was curious. He took a bite of the food bar. It crumbled like sawdust and tasted like someone had tried to make chocolate out of despair. He chewed anyway, washing it down with a swig of water. This is it, he said aloud. The ultimate adventure. No tour guides. No brochures. Just me, a malfunctioning compass, and a tree that bleeds blueberry motor oil. He chuckled to himself. It was absurd. It was terrifying. It was perfect. Arthur took a deep breath, adjusted his pack, and stepped forward into the unknown. Chapter 8. Arthur had been walking for about 15 minutes, marking trees every 10 meters with his pocket knife. The blue sap still reeked like burnt onions and regret, but it was the only breadcrumb trail he had. The forest remained eerily silent. No birdsong, no buzzing insects, not even the rustle of small creatures in the underbrush. It was as if life here had taken a vow of quiet. Then he heard it. A low, rumbly thump thump thump, distant but growing louder. It wasn't natural. It didn't belong to wind or thunder or anything that creaked or crawled. It was mechanical, rhythmic, purposeful. Arthur paused, ears straining. The sound was getting closer. The sky above was a dull haze, neither cloudy nor clear. There was no sun, just a diffuse brightness that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. He had no idea which direction he was heading, but when he turned to look back, he could see the marked trees standing like sentinels in a neat line. That gave him comfort. He wasn't lost. Not yet. The noise grew louder, more distinct. It had a pulse now, like a giant engine idling in the sky. Arthur debated turning back to the device. But then, just ahead, he spotted a clearing, a break in the forest that beckoned like a stage about to reveal its star performer. He stepped into it cautiously, boots crunching on the strange moss that carpeted the ground. And then it appeared. From the haze above, a shape descended, smooth, deliberate, and utterly alien. It hovered roughly 40 meters overhead, casting a wide shadow across the clearing. Nearly 25 meters across, it was disc-shaped, metallic, and gleaming with a dull silver sheen that shimmered like liquid mercury. The edges pulsed faintly, as if alive. Along its underside, concentric rings rotated slowly, emitting a low hum that Arthur could feel in his chest. A classic UFO. Arthur blinked. Well, doesn't that beat all? He muttered, mouth dry. So this is where they come from. The craft hung there, motionless, as if studying him. No windows, no visible propulsion, just a hovering impossibility, defying gravity and explanation. Arthur's heart pounded, not with fear, but with exhilaration. This was it. This was the kind of discovery that rewrote textbooks and made scientists cry into their lab coats. He had crossed into another reality, and now he was staring at proof that he wasn't alone. He reached slowly into his jacket, not for a weapon. He hadn't brought one, but for his notebook. He had to document this, had to remember every detail. The way the rings rotated, the faint vibration in the air, the smell. Yes, even the smell, which was oddly metallic and sweet, like ozone mixed with honey. Then, without warning, the craft shifted. Not moved, shifted. One moment it was hovering, the next it was simply gone. No sound, no blur, just absence. Arthur stood there, stunned. Had it scanned him? Had it decided he wasn't worth the trouble? Or was this just the beginning? He looked around the clearing, half expecting something else to emerge. A delegation, a probe, a welcome mat. But the forest remained silent, the haze above undisturbed. Arthur exhaled slowly. His hands trembled. He had come looking for adventure. What he found was something far bigger. A new world, a new species, a new kind of sky. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something extraordinary. Chapter 9. Arthur stood there for a long moment, blinking like a man who'd just walked into the wrong room at a party and wasn't sure if he should apologize or pretend he meant to be there. The disc-shaped craft had vanished as mysteriously as it arrived, leaving behind only silence and a faint smell of warm metal. He rubbed his eyes. Did I really see that? He wondered. Maybe I'm dehydrated. Maybe the food bar was laced with hallucinogens. Wouldn't be the first time I bought something questionable from a military surplus store. Then, movement. Out of the corner of his eye, something flickered. He turned, expecting another blur, another vanishing act. But this time, they didn't vanish. 3 of them. Not tall, maybe 1.6 meters, tops. Their arms hung long and loose, almost to their knees. Legs short and slightly bowed, like they'd skipped leg day for the last 1,000 years. Heads shaped like eggs, tilted slightly forward, and eyes, those eyes, large, black, and glossy, like polished obsidian marbles. No noses, tiny mouths, no clothes, no weapons, just standing at the edge of the clearing, staring. Arthur stared back. It was a standoff of the most awkward kind. His brain kicked into overdrive. Do I approach? Do I run? Do I wave? Do I pretend I'm tying my shoe and hope they go away? Do I just stand here like an idiot? He chose option E, stand there like an idiot. Then, like a voice inside his head, or maybe outside, or maybe both, came the thought. Not spoken, but delivered, like a package dropped into his mind. You are in no danger, Arthur. We mean you no harm. You are welcome here. Arthur blinked. Okay, he said slowly. Either I've finally snapped, or I've just been telepathically welcomed by 3 naked eggmen in a forest that smells like burnt onions. Another thought arrived, crisp and clear. You are the first of your kind to visit us here. Arthur scratched his chin. Well, that tracks. I don't imagine there's a lot of traffic through the wormhole network these days. The 3 beings remained motionless, like statues carved from curiosity. Arthur took a tentative step forward. They didn't flinch. He took another. Still nothing. Right, he muttered. So I guess I'm the ambassador now. Fantastic. I didn't even bring a tie. He stopped a few meters away, close enough to see the faint shimmer of their skin, like it was made of liquid crystal, shifting subtly with the light. One of them tilted its head, just slightly, as if amused. Arthur tilted his head back. You know, he said, I once negotiated a truce between 2 angry farmers over a broken fence and a stolen goat. I'm practically qualified for this. The being said nothing, but Arthur felt something, an invitation, maybe, or just the absence of threat. Either way, he wasn't running. Not yet. He stood there, heart thudding, mind racing, and thought, this is it. This is the moment where everything changes. And then, quite suddenly, he sneezed. Loud, wet, unavoidable. The beings flinched. Arthur froze. Sorry, he said. Allergies. Your trees are weird. Chapter 10. The beings didn't speak, not in the way Arthur did. No words passed between them. No mouths moved. Their communication was clean, direct, and strangely intimate. Thoughts arrived in his mind like gentle waves, never intrusive, never loud, just present. Arthur, on the other hand, couldn't stop talking. He rambled. About Mary. About timber. About the farm, the accident, the device, the theories, the food bars that tasted like drywall. He spoke of loneliness, of the ache that had settled into his bones after Mary passed, of the silence that had grown louder with each passing year, and how strange it was, how wonderful, to finally have someone to talk to, even if they were naked egg-headed aliens with no noses. The 3 beings listened, patiently, quietly, no judgment, no interruption, just presence. When Arthur finally ran out of words, a single thought arrived in his mind, soft and warm. You are at peace now, Arthur. Rest now. And he did. He lay down right there in the clearing, on the moss that felt like velvet and smelled faintly of cinnamon. His eyes closed, and sleep took him instantly, deep, dreamless, and healing. When he awoke, he felt alive, more alive than he had in years. His joints didn't ache. His mind didn't race. His heart didn't feel heavy. It was as if something inside him had been reset. The 3 beings were still there, watching over him like silent guardians. I dreamt of songs, Arthur said, voice cracking with emotion. And happiness. They nodded, slowly. No words, just understanding. Then they turned and began to walk. Arthur followed. They led him through the forest, past trees that shimmered with impossible colors and leaves that whispered secrets in the wind. The air grew warmer, brighter. And then, the trees parted, and Arthur saw it. A city. Not like any city he'd ever known. Towering structures of glass and light rose into the sky, their surfaces rippling like water. Vehicles soared silently overhead, gliding on invisible currents. More beings, like the 3, moved through the streets, graceful and serene. No shouting, no sirens, no smog, just quiet motion and radiant peace. Arthur's breath caught. It was beautiful, unreal. A civilization that had once been like his, thousands of years ago, now evolved beyond noise and conflict and decay. Our civilization was once as yours, came the thought, many thousands of your years ago, but we advanced, as you will advance. Arthur felt the weight of those words, not as a boast, but as a promise. You may stay here, Arthur, came the next thought, if you wish. Arthur stood there, heart full, eyes wide. The honor of the offer was not lost on him. To be welcomed, to be invited into a world so far beyond his own. It was everything he had ever dreamed of. But then, Quietly, the realization crept in. This was not his home. These were not his people. If he stayed, he would be safe. He would be cared for. But he would be alone. Truly alone. No Timber. No Mary. No familiar smells or sounds or memories. Just silence and beauty and the ache of being the only one of his kind. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his notebook. He scribbled furiously, sketches of the buildings, notes on the vehicles, descriptions of the beings. He documented everything. Because he knew. There were still other coordinates. Other worlds. Other wonders waiting to be discovered. Arthur turned to the beings and nodded, grateful. "Thank you," he said aloud. "But I'm not done yet." They didn't protest. They simply bowed their heads, and Arthur felt their acceptance like a warm breeze. He turned back toward the forest, toward the device, toward the unknown. The adventure wasn't over. Not yet. The end of episode 1 of The Device by Gord B.